Carrying 20% credit card debt while chasing a 10% stock market return isn't investing. It's a guaranteed net loss of 10% every single year. That silent arithmetic destroyed more middle-class wealth last year than any market crash. And the apps you trade on were built to keep you from doing that math. In May 2026, the most studied investor alive sat before the shareholders of Berkshire Hathaway. He looked out at the financial world, and what he said should have stopped every retail investor cold. If you found your way to this channel, you've already chosen clarity over noise, and that choice matters. Committing to that principle, perhaps by subscribing, deepens your own accountability to it. Share your investment philosophy in the comments. This is where serious thinkers sharpen each other. Warren Buffett's exact words, recorded in the protocols of that May 2026.
The most studied investor alive, and his verdict in 2026 was not optimism. It was alarm. What does it mean when the calmest man in finance is alarmed? The conventional argument for entering the stock market rests on one number: the S&P 500's historical average annual return of roughly 9 to 10%. It is real, it is documented, and for a specific category of investor, it is completely beside the point. Consumer credit cards charge 18 to 20% annually, not in exceptional circumstances, routinely. That is the rate compounding against you on every balance you carry into the next month. Run the arithmetic. A portfolio gaining 10% while debt compounds at 20% generates a net return of negative 10% every year. Not because you picked the wrong stock.
Here is the thought that virtually no financial content will say plainly. You may already be holding the single highest returning investment on earth and calling it a problem instead of an asset. Paying off a 20% credit card balance is a 20% return, guaranteed, risk-free, tax-free. It begins the moment the payment clears. No hedge fund delivers this consistently, no index fund promises it, no bond, dividend, or asset class available on any regulated capital market in the world offers a guaranteed 20% annual return. You have access to one right now. Most people are ignoring it to open a trading app. Consider what that means. The highest return, zero risk position available to you requires no brokerage account, no market timing, no research, just the decision to stop paying interest on what you already.
Zero commission trading sounds like a gift. Remove transaction costs, and you democratize access. That is the pitch. But removing friction also removes a psychological safeguard. When action feels free, it feels safe. It is not. Brokerage platforms built their interfaces around neurobiological triggers, the same mechanisms used by social media and casinos, not to improve your returns, to maximize your activity. Activity generates data. Data generates revenue. Your compulsive trading is the product, not the purpose. The fear of missing out became institutionalized. Mass retail capital began flowing not toward undervalued businesses, but toward viral trends, toward whatever was moving, toward whatever was being discussed loudest. Ask yourself honestly.
They stopped thinking like partial owners of real enterprises. They started thinking like bettors, trying to profit from every fluctuation, reacting to every headline, attempting to hit every pitch. Buffett's counterpoint is quiet and absolute. The stock market is not baseball. In baseball, a batter who doesn't swing at a pitch is penalized. On the market, passing on an opportunity costs you nothing. The market offers thousands of prices every single day. You are obligated to act on none of them. But that patience, that capacity to wait indefinitely for the genuinely obvious opportunity is only available to the investor who is not under financial pressure.
Carrying 18 to 20% consumer debt creates constant pressure. It shortens the time horizon. It turns the most powerful edge in investing, patience, into something you literally cannot afford. This is the reframe that Buffett's 2026 diagnosis demands.
Eliminating toxic debt is not a preparatory step before real investing begins. It is the investment. It is the highest yield capital allocation available to most people, and it compounds from the moment you make it. Once that foundation is cleared, the discipline becomes possible. The patience becomes possible. But the market you step into, even debt-free, was not designed with your advantage in mind. This content is produced for educational purposes only. Nothing in this chapter constitutes financial advice. What follows is an analysis of documented market structures and one investor's framework for navigating them with discipline and precision. You did not stumble into a casino. You were carried.
The first force is gamification. Your trading application is not a financial tool. It is a behavioral engine. And the science behind it was not developed on Wall Street. These platforms were built using the same techniques that behavioral psychologists and neurochemists identified as the core architecture of compulsion. The reward loops that keep you scrolling past midnight were reconstructed pixel by pixel inside a brokerage interface. The result is dopamine release animations, confetti effects celebrating your first trade, a reward architecture borrowed from casino floors and social media feeds, rendered in the clean, authoritative design language of professional finance. The architecture does not announce itself. It arrives in a dark mode interface, a precisely engineered chart, and a button that says Buy Now.
Here is the question it will never ask you. If this platform earns revenue every time you trade, not every time you profit, whose interests is every design decision actually serving? The second engineered force is the elimination of trading commissions. This presented as democratization. In practice, it constructed a catastrophic cognitive illusion. When a transaction costs nothing to execute, the human mind classifies it as carrying no risk. Zero transaction cost does not mean zero risk. It means the friction that once slowed an impulsive decision was surgically removed. What followed was entirely predictable. Trading frequency increased, trading volume increased, and trading losses increased alongside both. The third force is institutionalized FOMO, fear of missing out. This is no longer a personal psychological vulnerability. It has been industrialized.
Retail capital now moves in massive, coordinated waves, driven not by fundamental analysis of business value, but by viral trends on social platforms. Three forces. Gamification, engineered for compulsion. Zero friction, creating the illusion of zero consequence. Manufactured urgency, converting patience into perceived failure. Together, they form a machine, one that runs at scale, around the clock, against millions of retail participants simultaneously. Its product is you. When a stock surges on social media, billions of dollars flow toward it within hours, not because investors analyzed the underlying business, not because the fundamentals justified the price, because the psychological pain of watching others profit became unbearable. That is not investing. That is a stampede. And stampedes destroy the wealth of everyone who arrives last. The stock market is not baseball. In baseball, 3 strikes and you are out. Standing still is penalized by the rules of the game. But the market presents thousands of price quotes every single trading day and penalizes you for none of them. You are never required to swing. Buffett named this the no-called strikes rule. You may observe pitch after pitch, company after company, trend after trend, and decline every single one. The market cannot call you out.
not acting is always a legitimate act. The machine's power depends entirely on one manufactured belief: that inaction is a form of loss, that watching a price rise without owning it is a failure of nerve. But Buffett established the statistical reality long before the machine existed. Discipline of waiting outperforms hyperactivity. So when the right moment finally arrives, how exactly do you recognize it? Capital is not destroyed by the decisions you did not make. It is destroyed by the decisions you forced. By executing
Every trade made from pressure, rather than from conviction, is a voluntary wealth transfer from your portfolio to someone better positioned to receive it. The cause of capital loss is not a missed opportunity. It is the compulsion to act in the absence of a compelling reason to act. Inaction, properly understood, is not passivity. It is the most active form of financial discipline available to a serious investor. Every business that earns a position in a serious portfolio must possess a sustainable, structural competitive advantage. Buffett calls this an economic moat, a monopoly position, a self-reinforcing network effect, a technological barrier, or a scale advantage that
It is the minimum entry requirement. But knowing a moat exists is still not sufficient reason to act. Even a great business can be purchased for the wrong reasons, at the wrong price, based on the wrong logic. Buffett applies one final mechanical filter to every prospective transaction. He calls it the clean sheet principle. If you cannot state on a single page, using verifiable financial metrics, precisely why you are purchasing a share of this specific business, if you cannot write that argument in clear, measurable terms, then your transaction is not classified as an investment. It is classified as gambling. There is no middle category, no gray zone, no exception for good intentions. This one-page test removes emotion from the decision, and it constructs the wall that permanently excludes hype, headlines, social media momentum, and viral trends from the portfolio. Buffett calls this wall the circle of competence. The rule is absolute. If you cannot pass the clean sheet test for a given investment, it resides outside your circle, regardless of how profitable it appears to others, and regardless of how much fear of missing out that observation produces. Success in investing is not determined by the breadth of your knowledge. It is determined by the precision with which you understand the edges of your ignorance. The machine built to extract capital from the emotional has no operational power inside that circle. But the capital it collects does not disappear. It flows somewhere, accumulating across millions of investors, across an entire generation. And the consequences of that flow extend far beyond any individual portfolio. In the last
When the emotional investor sells in panic or buys at the peak, where does that money actually go? It does not disappear. Capital is not destroyed in a market collapse. It is transferred, mathematically, mechanically, from the account of the reactive to the account of the patient. During periods of high volatility, the flow has a consistent destination. Institutional investors, market makers, algorithmic funds that execute in microseconds without a single human emotion involved in the decision. These are not lucky players. They are not gifted with superior information. They simply refuse to be emotional. In a system engineered to harvest emotion, that refusal is the entire competitive.
But the consequences of that concentration do not remain inside trading accounts. They migrate into the physical world, into neighborhoods, into households, into the middle class that was told the market was its surest path to financial security. When enough ordinary people lose enough capital at a market peak,
History is unambiguous. Household balance sheets collapse. Living standards contract. And electorates that expected prosperity begin demanding explanations from governments that had none to give. Social tension rises. Political populism follows. The legislative response to a financially devastated public is always the same pattern: restrict, regulate, and constrain the very markets that failed them. Regulators intervene. The SEC in the United States, ESMA across Europe. They move to limit what unqualified investors can access. Specific practices, like payment for order flow, come under direct attack.
The information environment that fed the speculation is placed under oversight. The gambling epidemic does not only destroy individual wealth, it generates the political pressure that ultimately eliminates financial freedom for everyone, including those who never placed a single speculative trade in their lives. And the damage extends further still. Trillions of dollars that could have funded infrastructure, energy, medicine, and fundamental science are instead absorbed by speculative instruments. These are companies with no viable business model, sustained entirely by aggressive marketing and the manufactured attention of platforms built to keep capital moving, not productive. The real economy is starved. The casino.
Buffett's May 2026 warning was not a prediction of a market correction. It was a structural diagnosis, and its consequences extend far beyond any single portfolio, any single generation, into the question of what a rational individual does when the system itself is the risk. So the only question that remains is a personal one. When the design intent is extraction, what does a rational person actually do? Buffett's answer is not a strategy tied to current conditions. It is not a formula that expires when the cycle turns. It is a doctrine.
Clear the debt first. Every other decision follows from that single act of financial discipline. The second constant is operational. Your circle of competence is not a suggestion. It is the hard perimeter that separates you from the machine. If you cannot write down clearly on one page using measurable financial metrics why a specific business deserves your capital, the clean sheet principle has its verdict. That transaction is not investing. It is gambling dressed in the language of investing. The third constant is the one the financial entertainment industry will never promote. It cannot be packaged into an app notification. It cannot be gamified. It carries no commission for anyone who recommends it. It produces no engagement metrics, no viral moment, no sense of urgency whatsoever. Invest continually.
A highly qualified specialist in medicine, in engineering, in law, in any domain of genuine expertise can always exchange their labor for equivalent goods and services. That exchange holds regardless of what the currency is doing, regardless of what any index is printing, regardless of what the market does tomorrow. In an era of engineered market volatility and macroeconomic instability, that is the only asset that cannot be inflated away. Not gold, not real estate, not any fund or instrument available on any platform. Your own irreplaceable compounding competence. The one thing the system cannot reprice, cannot gamify, and cannot take from you. And sitting above
Only time and the deliberate refusal to interrupt it. The epidemic will not end. The casino will not close. The notifications will grow louder. The algorithms will grow faster. The engineered fear of missing out will be refined with greater precision every single year. The only question that has ever mattered is whether you are the player or the house. This content is produced for educational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.